Hello, wonderful people of the internet. My name is Michael Creek, and today we are going to program some very useless stuff in Max for Life. I'm excited, I had a glass of wine, life is super peachy, and today we're not gonna do like one video, but 3 videos of programming goodness. To be very specific, the first video is going to be about the general problem that I want to tackle with the Max for Life device that we're going to build, and also give a very short overview of the Live API and the Live object model. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then this tutorial is the right one for you. In the second video, we're going to get to actually program stuff in Max for Life, which is going to be fun. And then there's going to be a problem, spoiler alert. And in the third video, we are going to talk about what recursion in programming is, why it's awesome, and why it's not always so awesome in Max. Because Max and recursion, they don't really get along so well. But now, what do we want to do? We want to create this here very, very small little thingy. It serves a very specific purpose. This came up when I was building MIDI effect racks. And the cool thing about any kind of rack in Ableton is that once you finish building your rack, then it can be maybe very complex under the hood. I try to build racks in a way that in the end, I have all the information I need available upon seeing these 8 macros. So I build a rack, I create chains, I put effects in there and I work with them. And then I build up those macros. And once I'm done, I never want to have to go back into the rack itself again, but I want to be able to do everything that I need to do with these 8 macros. So as you can see, there's a lot of collapsed stuff here. There is a second MIDI effect rack in our first MIDI effect rack. And in that second MIDI effect rack, there is an arpeggiator. Now, the problem is that the macros in Ableton always only display a numerical number here. And that can be a problem. For example, this macro here, as you can see, is mapped to another macro, and that macro is mapped to the style that the arpeggiator is using. So, as you can see when I fiddle here, the style in the arpeggiator is going to change. And that can be very, very daunting because you kind of have to know where the thresholds are. So when exactly does the arpeggiator jump from one style to another style? And also you kind of always have to look up this arpeggiator, because if you don't do it, then it's going to be very hard to remember which number corresponds to which style. So enter our little Max device. What this device is supposed to do is it's going to check your channel for any kind of devices. And you can select one of these devices here, and then you can select one of the parameters that this device has here. And then the value of this parameter is tracked, as well as, in the case of our arpeggiator, the style of arpeggiation. So you can see when I change this knob, you can immediately see what kind of arpeggiation is activated right now. And although this device might seem a little bit superfluous, it is a very good way, I think, to get into the live object model, because just being able to find all the devices and all the parameters with your Max for Live objects is going to open up a lot of possibilities to you. So let's get to some very basic programming. You can see this is just a random MIDI channel with some effects and a synthesizer. That's not important. What's important is you go and hit up Max for Live in your browser, and you go up and open the Max MIDI effect, and then you take your generic Max MIDI effect and put it somewhere in your MIDI chain. To start programming, simple hit up this square thing. It will open up a Max Patcher window. And from everything that you can see here, we actually need nothing. And especially those 4 things, they are just comment boxes. We don't need those at all. Those, as you might have figured, just ensure that all the MIDI data that comes into our channel here leaves our device here without being altered, and that's okay for us. Now, one thing that I advise you to do in every Max for Live device you ever build is, first of all, hit up Command-Shift-I for your patcher inspector and tick the box Open in Presentation. Because in Max, everything you build has a patcher view and a presentation view. You can toggle either by hitting this button here or by hitting Command-Alt-E. And the very, very big advantage you have when you open your thing, your patcher, in presentation view is that just imagine you have some kind of user interface objects and they are connected to your stuff, although this does not make any sense at all. If you wanted to have this object here visible in your actual little window down here, then normally you would have to take it and drag it to the top of your patcher, and this looks horrible. Whereas if you use the Open in Presentation option, then you can just add it to the presentation by hitting Command-Shift-P. You can see it's in the presentation now by its glowing red outline. And then go into presentation mode and just move it wherever the heck you want. You can see this here are the confinements of our device. This is what you can actually see down here once you've finished your device. And now when I switch back to patching mode, it goes right back where it belongs, and all the stuff with the cables is a lot more neatly organized. But this was just an introduction. When you want to work with the live object model, you need 3 different Max objects. And to create a new Max object, what you do is you hit N for new object. This will open up this little window here, which then lets you type in any kind of object you want, and there is thousands of them. Now what we need is live.path. We also need live.object. And last but not least, live.observer. So, as you can see, those objects have inputs on top and outputs on the bottom. You can mouse over them, and most of the objects in Max will give you a very, very nice little help with what this in and output actually does. And you can also see that different objects have different numbers of in and outputs. If you ever try to create an object that does not exist in Max, it's going to be outlined and highlighted in red. So you always know when something is wrong. Goody. Now these objects you need for the live object model. But what is the live object model? Luckily, there is a handy reference. Just go to Help, Max for Live, which will open. Oh, this is not where I wanted to go. Cheeky helping window. Come on. Let's do this once again. What you should see when you hit Max for Live is this. This is a very nice documentation. I highly advise you just go in there and click some links and read about stuff because it's awesome. But where we want to go, you can navigate by clicking Live API and then Live Object Model. Now, the Live Object Model is basically what Ableton looks like to Max for Live. And what the Live Object Model does is it is an API, and API means Application Programming Interface. And it basically is what one software gives to another software, so this other software can work with the things inside of the first software. So in this case, Ableton allows Max for Live to interact with all the parameters and all the nuts and bolts deep inside Ableton itself. And in order to interact with Ableton, Max for Live first needs to know where exactly it is going and what thing it is manipulating. And for that, the Live Object Model assigns a unique ID code to everything in Ableton. For example, every track has its own ID code, and every clip has its own ID code, and every device has its own ID code, and every parameter inside of a device has its own ID code, and so on and so forth. So they are all just given some numbers, and when you are able to find a way to retrieve those numbers, then you can interact with the device or parameter or whatever that this number represents. And for this, life.path is your helper. Now, life.path allows you to navigate through this flowchart just as if it was a car on a highway or something. You just look where you want to go. For example, let's say we want to adjust the volume of our first track in Ableton. This is going to be this little bit here where we want to go. But to navigate there, you start here with the live path and you tell it to go to the live set. And then you tell it to go to your tracks, specifically to your first track. And then you're going to tell it to navigate to the mixer device. And then you're going to tell it to go to the volume. And then you're able to manipulate the volume. So to do that, just create a message box, which you can get by hitting M for message. And connect your message box to your live.path object. And now here you type path, and then whatever is the way that your live.path object is going to take. In this case, it's going to be live_set. And then it's going to go to tracks. And then you need to tell it which track to select. I said it's going to be the first track, so we hit tracks 0 because, you know, it's ITE and everything starts counting up at 0. It's just how it works. And then you go to the mixer_device. You can see here. And then you go to the volume. And what the live path object is going to do is, in its left outlet, it's going to give you an ID code. Bam, 116. And this is the ID that the volume of our first track is assigned. Now we know where we want to go, and live.object and live.observer can both now interact with this path. And both of these objects have a right inlet that says ID in. And this is basically why the live.path object and the live object are best friends, because you can just take the output of the path, put it right in here. And the next time you tell your live.path to go this way by holding down Command and clicking the message box, this live.object is linked to ID 116, which is the volume of our first device. To prove you this, we can now connect another message box. Be sure to use the right inlet because that is what actually lets you set the message. And tell the live object to spill out the content of this volume parameter by telling it get value. We put this in the left input of the live.object and hit it up, and you can see we get value 0.78 and so on. Now, when I change this value, for example, like this, and I go back to max, and I press get value again, you can see that now the now correct value is being displayed. Now, this thing has one kind of problem, which is that unless you keep hitting get value, you will not see the current value. And this is where the live observer comes in. Live observer observes an ID in Ableton and outputs every change of it all the time. So let me route this to the path of ID 116. And then you need to tell the live.observer that the property that you're looking after is the value. Put it in the left inlet, hit it up, and you can see it's now in real, It's now in real time linked to our volume. Wow, awesome. All right, one more live object that we want to look at is live.remote tilde. Live.remote tilde is kind of the counterpart to live.observer. Live.observer takes any property and looks at it and shows you the value, and live.remote sets a value. So this one is kind of an input thing and this is an output thing. No, the other way around. This is an output thing because it outputs the current value, and this is an input thing because you put things in there and then they are set in Ableton. Now, live.remote tilde has a tilde at the end because it is an object that works with audio signal. And in Max, everything that works with audio has a tilde at its end because tilde kind of looks like a waveform. In order for this one to work, you also give it an ID in the right inlet. And then in the left inlet, you can basically put any kind of floating number in or a signal. In our case, why not have a sine wave modulate the volume? Sine waves in Max are created with the cycle tilde object. And the cycle tilde object has a few arguments. Arguments are things that you put after your object's name and after a space. And they are like the initial values that you give your object. And most of these arguments can later be changed by inputting data into the different inputs of the object. In this case, cycle tilde wants to have the frequency, which is measured in hertz. So let's say 0.1, which means every 10 seconds, our sine wave is done with one oscillation. Now, connect your cycle tilde object to the live.remote, and you can see that instead of these black cables, which transfer information, these cables transfer audio signal. Okay, now one thing that I found out just while recording is that in order for live.remote to work, you need to be inside of a Max for Live device. And although we technically are inside a Max for Live device, it only works once you have saved this thing one time. So go to Save As. I call this Device Checker 1. Bam. Now we've saved it. Now all you need to do is give the correct path to your live.remote by once again holding Command and clicking this. And you can see that now the live.remote is modulated by the cycle. Although there's one kind of clumsy mistake by me, the cycle tilde object oscillates between +1 and -1, whereas the live remote only works with 0 and 1. So what we should do is maybe take the absolute value, which means everything below 0 is converted to above 0. And now we can see something that looks a bit more like a sine wave, although not really. It's half a sine wave. Hey, come on. All right, so much for the basis. Have fun. See you in the next tutorial.